What's better in spell work? Focusing on what you want or focusing on what you don't want?
If you would like to learn about fairy folklore, delve into modern fairy faith spirituality, and explore fun and fanciful fairy-themed events, please subscribe to Fairy Fortunes for new videos every Friday.
Hello, my fair friends. I'm Ruby Ruse, and on today's episode of Fairy Fortunes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the power of positivity. The reason for that is that I truly believe that magic really has to be framed in a context of what you want as opposed to something that you don't want. It is useful to know what you don't want. It is a way to start a spell. If you know what you don't want, you can use that information to help you root out what you do want. There isn't necessarily anything wrong with negative energy. Negative energy tends to put on the brakes, if you will. Think of what you don't want as your brake pedal, and think of what you do want as the gas pedal in a car. The gas pedal is going to take you places, whereas the negative energy is going to make you stop and analyze. So negative energy isn't necessarily bad, and positive energy may not always be what you want. But in the context of a spell, you don't necessarily want to put on the brakes. The whole point of a spell is to propel you somewhere new. So that's why using positive framework in a spell works better than focusing on what you don't want. I think when we talk about things that we don't want, it's a hyper focus on something. So if you don't want something, all you're thinking about is the thing that you don't want. And they've actually done a little bit of scientific studies with this. If you ever heard of the white bear theory, is the idea is that if you tell someone not to think of a white bear, all they can think about is white bears. It's true. It's just the way that the sentient mind tends to work. In a magical context, if you're like, oh, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that, all you're thinking about really is that. And so in a magical context, that, even though you don't want it, is constantly appearing before you and in your life and becoming that roadblock. I experienced this myself when I was trying to get out of debt. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get out of debt. I have so much debt. I don't want debt. And so all I could think about was debt. But I hadn't really articulated what it was that I wanted. So when I was trying to do magic for debt reduction, it was very unsuccessful because debt kept throwing up in my face because I was hyper-focused on debt. So that is the reason that I think that when you're doing a magical spell, is that you have to sit down and really think about what it is that you want and not about what you don't want. If you want to look at it as like the powers that be, like the energy out there that helps magic manifest, if we personify that which is like receiving all this energy, if we look at it in that context, if we make the universe this personified entity, if you will, and you keep telling that entity over and over again, debt, all they hear is debt. The crux of the message is debt. And so what I think is happening is that the universe, the personified entity, if you will, says, oh, they want debt. Well, here, have it. just take more debt, because you keep talking about debt, so here, have debt. Because the message is about debt, and while it may be what you don't want, it is what you are constantly focusing on. It is the white bear, and the white bear is always going to be in the room. Or the white rabbit. Bunny Mom! Yeah, don't follow that white rabbit. Right, Bunny? Anyway, So I personally think that when you're doing a magical spell, if you are trying to do debt reduction, instead of focusing on the debt, figure out what it is that you want. What actually do you want? And in my case, when I wrote that spell finally, I was like, I just want to pay my bills on time. I just want to have to pay the bills and maybe have some money left over. That's what I want. And so then I wasn't focusing on the debt. I was focusing on the task that I wanted to complete. And when I finally articulated what it was that I actually wanted, rather than trying to throw out there this white bear of debt that I was obsessing on and wasn't helping me, is that once I finally focused on what I actually wanted, I was finally able to create a spell that helped me accomplish that task. Now, there's a lot of talk about toxic positivity, and I think what that is more about is when you're faced with adversity, not acknowledging the truth of the adversity in the situation, which I think is a little bit different from using a positive framing in our spell work. A very basic example of toxic positivity is when you're not fine, saying that you're fine. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Life is good. It's a form of a lie in a way, isn't it? Because the positivity really isn't true. One way I've been trying to combat toxic positivity in my workplace actually is people ask me how I am, and I'm like, I'm here. I just tell them what's obvious. I am here, and it is now. It actually does help me to be a more authentically positive person, because I'm like, yeah, I am here, and it is now. And there's something within that is strength and is something to almost celebrate, because, I'm here, I'm alive, and things are, they are difficult, but I am obviously capable of surviving them. So it's more of an acknowledgement rather than, doing a trauma dump on like my coworkers who really don't care that I'm not fine. So I think that's a very simplistic version of toxic positivity. Another form of toxic positivity is when people saturate you with love bombing, with the expectation that you will work harder for them, that kind of thing. So toxic positivity is not what I mean in spell work. It's about really honing what it is that you want to accomplish with your magic and trying to phrase that in a motivating way. I did talk about this a little bit in my gratitude video as well, is that gratitude, I think, should also be phrased in a positive way. You don't want to say, I'm grateful that I didn't get into a traffic accident while driving, because then you're focusing on what didn't happen, and it kind of takes the energy down here. But if you say, I'm grateful that I have skill in driving and I'm a safe driver. See how the energy is more uplifted there? Like you're focusing on your actual skills, and it's not, bringing it down a level there. And it's the same thing with spell work, is that you kind of want that energy to be uplifted. So if you made it to the end of this video, I really would be curious to know about either a spell that you framed in a positive way that worked really well for you, or did you have a spell that you felt was completely disastrous, and do you think it's possible that it was framed in a context of what you didn't want rather than what you wanted? Let me know. And with that, have a magical day.